Hey everyone, this is DeagleBeagle. So, you know how Indeedee Armarouge is used so often? I was thinking of some Pokemon like Houndoom that could actually counter that. So, if you don't want to use Tyranitar, you have other options, even though I feel like Tyranitar is the highest tier Pokemon that effectively counters the combo. But if you want to try something else that's a bit more niche, you could try Houndoom because it actually is double immune to Armarouge, and Tyranitar is not immune to fire, but it's good enough, especially with Sand and Assault Vest to wall it. And Indeedee's not going to do very much with a neutral Dazzling Gleam because this is part fire. So here's some ideas I had with it. So you don't have to use Timid with it, but personally I would. If I was using Houndoom, I would use Timid because unlike Tar, Houndoom outspeeds and can one-shot Gholdengo with Overheat and possibly Dark Pulse. Let me calc it really quick. So if you use Timid, let's just pretend it's a min bulk Gholdengo. So if you use Dark Pulse, and let's pretend too it doesn't Terra Steel, because it could Terra Steel. Okay, that doesn't quite kill it, because Gholdengo is pretty bulky and it's kind of a broken Pokemon. So, so this does have Overheat though, which I know that's gonna kill it, even if it Terra Steals. Terra Steel wouldn't help wall it, but I meant in case it Terras. Like Dark Pulse is a less reliable move against Gholdengo because it could Terra Steel. It almost always is Terra Steel, obviously, because it's trying to improve that Make It Rain broken move. So I would recommend Overheat with the one that doesn't have a Life Orb or a Specs on it normally. And you may be wondering why flying. Well, if you think about what Dark Fire is weak to, it's weak to fighting, it's weak to ground, and it reminds me similar. It's similar to the King Ambit typing, and except instead of steel, it's fire. And what else makes what else is this weak to? Rock. Rock is not that common. You might have to just let yourself be weak to rock, because if you try to counter rock, then you'll lose against the other two typings that are a lot more common. There is Tyranitar Rock Slide like Can Rock and stuff, but rock is pretty rare in general in this meta game. Even before in Series 1 it wasn't that common. I mean there are sometimes unstabbed rock slides, Garchomp rock slides, but typically Pokemon that would try to hit Houndoom with the rock slide could hit it more powerfully with something like Earthquake. So anyways, this is one idea. Safety goggles is one way to go through redirection from Rage Powder. So let's say they have Gholdengo with Amoonguss. Well, you're immune to their Spore and you can go through it in one shot the Gholdengo. So this is to make it useful against more than just the Indeedee Armarouge matchup. If you want a more dedicated Indeedee Armarouge counter type of Houndoom, then you might want to use like a Choice Specs one or something else. So this is the Life Orb one. Oh wait, Dark? I don't know about it. Well, yeah, maybe use Dark if you really want to counter it more, even though they could Terra Fairy with Indeedee. So, I mean, you could just Dark Pulse it though and wait for it to Terra Fairy and try to overheat it, but a lot of times they have Psychic Seed, so I kind of like Tyranitar more than Houndoom because they don't have anything on Indeedee that would boost their defense. They can only have at max like 128 defense with bold max EVs. So Crunch is going to do a lot to it. But they very commonly have Psychic Seed. I bet that's the most common item with it by far is Psychic Seed. There are other items used like Sash and Colbur, but for the most part, they're going to use that. Maybe Citrus, but almost all are going to use Psychic Seed because it's so good with making it special, especially in Series 2. The metagame is a lot more special in general. And I really like my Psychic Seed, Tera, what do you call it? Psychic Seed, Imprison, and Indeedee. By the way, you may be looking at this and you're thinking, early bird? Well, this is like just an idea I had. In case you get spored, you wake up. I don't know if I should describe it as twice as fast, but I believe you would most likely be only asleep for one turn of sleep instead of like 2 or 3. I suppose you could be asleep for 2 turns, but I don't think you can ever be asleep for 3 turns with early bird. Let's look it up actually really quick. Early bird. While it's loading, we're gonna go to the next Houndoom set. So this is a Tera Grass one, and like I said, it's useful for going through Rage Powder, being immune to Spore and whatnot. And this one, by the way, you only need 150 speed, so if you want to make it 150, make it 150. But personally, I would make it more because if you look at the speed tiers, this is my blog. No one else has these kind of good speed tiers. There's other ones, but they're not focused enough on VGC. I feel like this one. So not perfect, there's some spaces and stuff, but it works just fine. So after Gholdengo, there's Hydreigon. There's a few other Pokemon. You would probably want to outspeed Baxcalibur and Great Tusk for sure. Those are used a lot. Max Speed Annihilate is used very rarely in a lot of these other Pokemon. I suppose they could use a Max Speed Jolly Arcanine, but even if you max speed, you would at most tie with that, and almost no one uses that. So if I were you, I would probably use like 153 speed or whatever, 150. But this is just for the sake of simplicity, just so you have a starting point to test this Pokemon with. And I know it would be very good versus Indeedee Armarouge, but you want it to do well versus other teams also, and not just that team. This would give it Tera Grass also as an offensive move. If you have a Sun team with Houndoom, you might want to have a Sun team with Houndoom, but maybe not though, because Sun boosts their photosynthesis. See, I would say Solar Beam, but I don't think you should normally use Torkoal. I think Torkoal and Manual Sun is very overrated because it boosts them oftentimes as much as you. Like, I have 2 photosynthesis mons, just like a lot of other people have a lot of photosynthesis mons, and they don't even use Sun at all. They'll take it if someone sets it up for them. They'll piggyback off it, but like, I wouldn't personally use a Sun team because they're just going to piggyback off it. Use something else. Use rain, use hail, use sand. Don't use Sun, guys. Just my opinion. Piggyback off their Sun. Okay. So there's some rare exceptions to that. But choice specs, this is another idea with Snarl. You could help Snarl their team and force them to have to wide guard with Armarouge or whatever. And you can use this besides stuff for Armarouge. You could, if you have Icy Wind with like Iron Bundle, you could use Snarl and even outspeed their Flutter Mane or whatever. And this is not that bulky though, so if you're using Snarl, you kind of might want to use Arcanine, but Arcanine, well, maybe not though, because Arcanine doesn't counter Indeedee Armarouge. See, that's where this niche Pokemon comes in, Houndoom, where you might need an Indeedee Armarouge combo, but then you might also need, for example, Dark or Fire moves or whatever, or Flash Fire. So overall, this Pokemon is not terrible, and I don't even think it's bad. Actually, it would be pretty good because there's Indeedee Armarouge on nearly every team. It seems like half of the teams have it. So definitely not a bad Pokemon. As far as it being great, I don't know. Maybe if you're facing a lot of if you're facing as many Indeedee Armarouges as we're seeing right now, then yeah, right now it would be pretty good. But not in comparison when you could have used something like Tyranitar, or there's other Pokemon too. If you look at Pokemon that are dark, immune to expanding force, and you look at the special defense, or there's hardly any ones that wall both expanding force. They're resistant to dark or resistant to fire from armor cannon, and also aren't 4 times weak to fairy from their Indeedee's Dazzling Gleam. So that's why I wouldn't use Hydreigon or Roaring Moon. I already had that Dazzling Gleam issue. So I picked Tyranitar, and it could mess up their weather and other stuff too. Break a sash with sand. It's the only weather that breaks a sash anymore because they took that effect off of hail when they made it into snow instead. But at least they made it so you boost ice type's defense by 50%. So Grimmsnarl is another good way to counter Indeedee Armarouge, Umbreon, Tyranitar. Not many other things, guys. There's Pelipper with Wide Guard. It reducing the power of armor cannon to half, and Wide Guard shutting down the expanding force. That is a pretty good idea. Especially you have Surf to go through the follow me. But just the rest of these, there's nothing that you could really do versus Armarouge and Indeedee unless you set up Trick Room and outspeed it and whatnot, but they could reverse it or stop you somehow. So I don't know about that. Personally, I would use a dedicated Indeedee Armarouge counter that's also good in general. So I guess maybe it's not dedicated, but Tyranitar counters that extremely well, especially with Assault Vest or Weakness Policy if they want a Dazzling Gleam. But Dazzling Gleam's going to do petty damage to that thing. That thing has so much special defense, and Misty Terrain could really shut it down too with Light Screen and Misty Terrain from Grimmsnarl. So that's what I've usually relied on to counter that combo. If I don't have something like that, I've typically lost. Like my hard Trick Room team lost to Indeedee Armarouge because I didn't prepare for the Life Orb armor cannon with the helping hand. So like I said, it pretty much counters everything except a few Pokemon, and I made the mistake of assuming that it wasn't that good because when I was using it at first in Series 1, it didn't seem that good because it wasn't really slow in Trick Room, or really fast in Trick Room, and not fast outside of it. So, certain things could just counter it. So, like, for example, just a straight up Earthquake, it forces them to Wide Guard and stuff, but their Indeedee could get up a Trick Room, so it's kind of tricky in that combo. But I think a lot of times people just beat Indeedee Armarouge with predicting correctly instead of an actual real counter that counters it no matter what it does. So Houndoom would be great for that. So stay tuned for the next video about Umbreon. That's another Pokemon that could counter Indeedee Armarouge, even though I think, like I said, Tar is probably the highest tier Pokemon that also counters it, and counters it about as great as you can get. So thanks for watching.